Hello, family, and welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name is Betty, and today I'm joined by David. And David is a spiritually transformative experiencer. He's a podcast host, he's a father, and a spontaneous musician. His title, not mine. I'm super grateful to connect with David today. We met and we did an episode of his podcast together. He's just getting it off the ground. And I thought that it would be a great opportunity to hear about your story and to introduce you to our community at IANDS so they can come and support you as well on your podcast journey. So I'm going to toss it right over to you. Thanks so much for your willingness to serve.
Betty, I can't thank you enough for having me on and giving me the opportunity just to share a little bit about my story. I'm a 41-year-old, pretty basic guy. Grew up in a Christian home in the deep South. I was actually raised in Statesboro, Georgia, and the first 7 years of my life were extremely sheltered. The church that I went to was also my school, and I got wall-to-wall, coverage about that God loves you very much, but if you step out of line, you're going straight to hell, and a lot of fire and brimstone, a lot of very, negative messaging. But I just remember being such an innocent and curious little kid. And when I was 7 years old, we moved all the way from Statesboro, Georgia to Washington State. For my dad was just trying to do something else, get a new job. And I think they were trying to get as far away from some of their family as possible. So yeah, we moved out to Washington State, and just mind blown because I was used to two lane roads everywhere and small town where everybody knew each other. And then all of a sudden it's, I'm on the freeway with 4 lanes of traffic, going each way. And I couldn't even handle what I was watching, what I was witnessing. There's mountains everywhere. There's snow on the mountains. Just a beautiful place for a 7-year-old to kind of explore life. And my older brother, Michael, he was a year and a half older than me. He's a critical part of my journey as well. But so we moved out to Washington State, and pretty typical childhood, going to church and just the usual stuff. But there was, from a pretty early age, I'd say about 6th grade, after all these experiences going to really alternating between public and private schools, I realized quickly how much I preferred public schools because there wasn't all the pressure of you have to do well academically as well as demonstrate that you're, a good Christian. And so about 6th grade was when things kind of started to fall apart for me. And I think that was the beginning of my sort of deconstruction. And it happened because I was getting into rock music, started playing drums around that same time. And I bleached my hair, which was a cardinal sin at this school, and they expelled me for it. So I kind of started to question what about God's love is calling them to expel me over my hair color, and made a whole stink about it. Anyway, skip forward to 8th grade, I go back to public school and really started thriving. But there was this constant tug of war going on because I'm playing drums for church. I'm trying to serve and be a good Christian, but I could tell that there was a lot of dishonesty and disingenuousness in the church and in the schools that I went to, and people just trying to funnel me into their way of thinking versus what was going on inside, which is there's a whole world to explore out here, and there's all this cool stuff. And meanwhile, my older brother Michael was really countercultural. He was kind of the trailblazer for both of us. He was getting really into rock music, and he loved Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails and all the really like heavy stuff. And it kind of, excited me. I got into a lot of the same music. And then we just sort of went through this roller coaster of deconstruction while our parents were trying so hard to force us into, being good Christians. We got to a point where they would punish us if we didn't go to church. Like we'd get our, we couldn't watch TV for the week. It wasn't anything extreme. It was just like stupid stuff. You couldn't play video games for a week if you didn't go to church. So there was just that real resentment that started building. But deep down, I wanted to make my parents happy because my brother was kind of, especially the black sheep. He had gotten into some really destructive stuff where he was, building explosives and really endangering himself and the family. So there was something in me that wanted to people please, wanted to make sure my parents were happy and that, I didn't disappoint them. So I was just trying to toe that line of keeping them happy, keeping the pastors happy. but inside I could tell something's not right here. Something's going off the rails. So fast forward to high school. I went to a public high school. I really enjoyed, again, having that escape from, the really religious sided aspect of schooling. And then I decided to go to a Bible college in England. And I was supposed to be there it was like only a 9-month program. It was a really compact school as far as, I don't even know what kind of certification there was. It was something that you really couldn't even use I don't even really know if it was seminary. It was just a basic kind of, education for your experience, but it was more of the same there. I got in trouble again for making a hairstyle change that was not condoned. And I was only there for 4 months out of the 9 months I was supposed to be there. And during that time, my parents had moved from Washington State back to Georgia. And so I didn't really have a place in Washington to go. So I moved to Georgia with them reluctantly. And that's when I met my wife, who I've been married to now for 19 years. And she was going to a Christian college in Georgia, and we had met, and we're very different people, but we had a real attraction to each other, I think, on a soul level, that we knew that we needed some kind of growth from each other. And so we had a very difficult long distance relationship for the next few years, because I actually ended up going to a college in Florida to learn how to record audio for, bands in the studio, stuff like that. So I took that back to Washington State. I moved back out there, and I was trying to make that work as a career. Wasn't panning out. And meanwhile, we got married. She moved out to Washington. And during that first month of marriage, my brother was in a near fatal car accident. And he spent the next 3 months in ICU, barely hanging on to life. And when he came back home, finally, he was moved to Georgia. He was living out in Washington at the time, but he moved to Georgia with my parents, and he was paralyzed from the chest down and needed a lot of help. And so we moved back out. My wife and I moved back out to Georgia to help them run their coffee shop and take care of my brother. And it was a really difficult stretch. I have two beautiful daughters that are now teenagers, which is shocking to me. But that time period of moving back to Georgia and trying to be a good husband and father and play drums for church and be involved in that way put so much pressure on me that I just started to really spiral. Started drinking a lot. I was smoking pretty regularly, just picking up a lot of negative habits, and gained a bunch of weight and just really out of sorts. And just started getting really depressed to a point where I was becoming more suicidal kind of by the year. And it culminated with COVID. Right when COVID was hitting, I was absolutely in the worst health of my life. I had been sick for like 5 months straight with bronchitis, strep throat, the flu, and something else. And I was just pretty much like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of trying to people please, make people happy. I'm not happy. They're not happy. And so I moved into an apartment, and the intent was to divorce my wife and to, basically leave my family. I had every intent to stay involved with my children, but I began to more and more think about what it was going to mean for me to get myself out of the picture and do it in a way that was, maybe it looked like an accident. So I started thinking a lot about how can I stage a car wreck or something to make it look like whoops, but actually, have it be something intentional. And right when I was pretty much at the absolute bottom, very, very close to ending it all, COVID started coming, and I kind of got this weird feeling of, well, I don't want to die from COVID. That would be really lame. And so I decided that if there's something out there for me, and at this point I was like done with the church, done with my faith, and I said, all right, God, if you're out there, if there's something for me, I'm all ears, but it's not going to come through Christianity. I'm done with that. But shortly after that prayer and that just desperation, I came across Wim Hof breathing method, which if you don't know who Wim Hof is, look him up. He's a very interesting Dutch guy who teaches breathing techniques. And I started doing that every day religiously. And I happened to find this natural doctor who was really out there, but really helpful. And within probably a period of a couple weeks, I went from daily suicidal ideation, despair, just wanting to be gone, to holy crap, what have I done? Like my life is beautiful. I've had all these beautiful things happen. I've never really been in dire straits, and my family loves me and I love them. And within a few months, I was healthy enough to come back home and work things out with my wife. I lost like 50 pounds in like 2 months. It was crazy. And just my health went from abysmal and always sick to like I really haven't been sick since then. I think I caught COVID one time and it was the lightest thing ever. And I'm not saying that to brag because I know a lot of people have been through hell with COVID. And I feel very fortunate that I haven't had, all the health problems I was having. But it was such a dramatic shift. And I remember specifically with the Wim Hof breathing, a couple sessions where I just felt this insane amount of tingling and vibration just going through my body and not knowing what the hell is going on, kind of freaking out. But that something happened there that completely reshaped my entire perspective. And I realized that I had done this on my own, that it hadn't come through any of the ways and means that my faith had told me it was going to happen. I thought, it was going to be through direct prayer to Jesus or following scripture. All these things I've been trying to do to save myself or to fix these problems weren't working. And I kind of discovered, oh, this is a power that's within myself. And I started to tell my parents, I'm sorry guys, but I don't think God was involved in this. I think I found the strength within myself and slowly kind of got to a point where I decided I was an atheist, and I was very vocal about it. I let my family know, and I love you and I appreciate you, but I'm not here to people please. I'm not here to make you happy based on what I believe about the world. So I became, really hardcore atheist and material scientist, and but still like, secular humanist. I still believe that humans have the power to harness good within themselves. I didn't know where that came from. And then I don't know, it just was one of those random things on YouTube where the algorithm found me in the right place, and I saw my first near-death experience video. This man, Andy Petro, older Ukrainian American man, and I just remember watching that video and weeping like a baby, and just being so overcome with, oh my God, there might be something else out there. This isn't just maybe a physical accident. This whole universe. And then I started watching more and more near-death experience videos, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And at the time, my wife had kind of come along on the journey with me. She was not going to church either. She had pretty much left her faith, but we both had. It took her a little longer. It took a little while for me to convince her to watch one of these near-death experience videos. But once she did, she wept like a baby. Same video, and so I just kept pouring over these videos, and it was just like an avalanche of all this resentment that I was still holding on to was just starting to melt off. Like I again remember crying for probably a period of 6 to 9 months, just almost every day, just feeling this deep well of emotions within me, just shocked and amazed that there was this whole other experience out there that I hadn't even heard about before. So yeah, it's culminated now to a place where I can't contain that joy for this possibility of life beyond life. And so started a podcast recently to talk about my experiences, but also to talk to amazing people like you, Betty, who have had really transformative experiences that are hard to stuff in a box and categorize. And yeah, so there's a lot of course gaps in between there, but that's sort of the meat and potatoes of my story.
Thank you so much for sharing. A lot came up for me while you were sharing. And I think that it's also really important, number one, to showcase people that the near-death experience phenomenon really touches, because I think that that's most of our audience is people, maybe they've had their own experience, but also people who are looking for hope. So the fact that you're talking about that you went from a rock bottom And then you were able to transform it and come out of it by using a couple of techniques. One of them, listening to near death experiences, the other one, the Wim Hof method. Like those tools are valuable for people. And so like we need to talk about that. We need to talk about what are the healing modalities that are working, because not everybody's going to die and have some transformative experience. We need to find the tangible tools here in the earth experience, because there are a lot of people who are having the same experience that you were having, or the same experience that I've had in my life too. So thank you for your willingness to get vulnerable and authentic and share about transformation. It's so inspiring. So one of the things that came up while you were talking, number one, I think that it's totally hilarious that both times that you kind of came up against the odds in school, it was surrounding your hair. And I don't know if you know this, but like there's some spiritual significance around hair. Some people think that that's like the stimuli of our consciousness is our hair. So I think that that's kind of something cool that like that's how it came up.
Mhm.
Another thing that you talked about was being a people pleaser and breaking some of the patterns in your life. And so I'm wondering if maybe you can share a little bit about how you go about your day to day today without, or do you still act on those kind of shortcomings, or have you transformed some of those as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a process. I feel like that first year and a half after the breakthrough with the Wim Hof breathing, it was like a new honeymoon for my wife and I, just for my life in general. I was really, really disciplined with the Wim Hof method and cold endurance stuff that was part of that, and really in a routine, a spiritual discipline without knowing it was a spiritual discipline. And then, not to sidetrack too much, but I ended up taking a job for a cannabis company doing customer service online, and I kind of found myself getting a little bit backtracked on the discipline, because part of the job was, testing product and things like that. And it's certainly easier to wake up in the morning and, you know, vape a little bit of cannabis versus doing some difficult exercise and breathing routine, or, these things that don't really feel necessarily super fun, but they're really beneficial. And so I kind of had some, the last few years have been a little bit of that pendulum swinging back and forth where, I kind of went from one extreme a little bit back to the other. But as far as the people pleasing part, that's been a regular process of just having to identify, which relationships are working for me and are pushing me forward, and which ones were keeping me stuck in that judgment and that fear and isolation. And a lot of friends from the church, you develop these bonds over judging everything around you and seeing the world as going to hell and waiting for the apocalypse. For the My dad and I studied end time prophecy for 2 years when I was in high school. Went to this special place that did really in-depth studies, and so my whole brain was geared towards, the end is coming and I need to be prepared and I need to size everything up and look for the Antichrist. And so it really skewed my ability to, again, just be in the moment, be positive. And so I did have to let go of some friendships that were really toxic. And at the time it was difficult because I felt like I was being a self-righteous jerk, or like I was abandoning them. But now I see that there is a necessity to do what's working for you, and to make sure that you're checking in with yourself and finding relationships that really, push you forward and make you want to be the person that you really are. And so I still struggle a bit with people pleasing, but I've really started to, the best way I can is, just to be non-judgmental about it and try to be patient with people and not stick it in their face like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm enlightened now, I don't need you anymore. It's much more like, look, I can't stay stuck in the negativity. And I feel like that was sort of our connection. And those conversations can go a lot of different ways, and it can be really difficult to let that go. But for me, that's been the most liberating thing, is just to try not to attach my emotions and my well-being to how other people perceive me, because I know that their feelings are going to change. They're going to have different things that they project back to me that are going to affect, if I hand them over my anchor and they are doing whatever they want with it, then I'm on this roller coaster with them, versus being able to just internalize that in a way that I'm secure in my own journey and not attaching it to everyone else's expectations. So yeah, it's definitely a process, and there's been some bumps along the way, but I can't tell you how valuable it's been just to be able to kind of, roll with the beat of my own drummer.
I love that. And you are a drummer, so that's so much better. It's beautiful. So I also would like to chat a little bit about your I almost used the word escape, but I definitely don't want to use that word. But like your disconnect from the church. I assume that you're not part of the church now, or are you?
No, I'm not affiliated with any religious organization at this point.
Okay. So I would, because, there might be somebody listening who's having the same sort of struggle. I hear it a lot. I see it a lot in comments on near-death experience videos too, where people are like, well, this is not what scripture says. So you're a liar and you're, like you're the devil, or however people perceive these experiences, but they're watching these near-death experience channels for some reason. So I'm curious if you have, I don't know, any like inspiring words for people who are kind of struggling with that they are hearing testimony of one thing, but that their faith is telling them something else. And how do they find the balance between those two things?
Yeah, that it's tricky, and I'm certainly not telling people you should abandon your faith or leave the church, because that might be something that's working really well for you. You might have a great community with the people there, which, that's one thing that I do miss about the church is there's a lot more emphasis on community and events and things you can do together. And, when you become an atheist, that kind of all goes away. It's really hard to find support. But I would just say that the most important thing is to trust that deep, deep part of you that's, you know, because I see a lot of people who are still, friends of mine who are in the church, and there's a lot of conflict just in the way they speak about trying to follow the Bible and trying to follow what their pastor says. I can just feel on a deep level that conflict between what they really know deep down, which is kind of the same thing for me. I always felt this deep sense of a loving God doesn't create to destroy. A loving God doesn't make this beautiful infinite world just so he can stuff a bunch of it into an incinerator forever. Like it that part always gnawed at me so heavily. And I see so many other people who are, I think, really genuinely good people in the church struggling with that exact same thing. So if you're going through that and you're feeling this conflict of what the Bible says versus what's in your heart, sorry to say, but you got to go with your heart. That's the part of you that is the most potent. And at this point, I believe that's where the Holy Spirit actually is. In each single person, we have that spirit within us because that's our true nature, I believe. And so listening to that conviction within you and that drive within you is to me the most powerful thing you can do. And, as you know, I've journeyed through, just started through A Course in Miracles. I finished the Course in Miracles Made Easy, which is just such a fantastic introduction to these ideas that we are eternal spirit, made exactly in the same with the exact same tools as source, the exact same love and ability to create. But we play this game of forgetting and coming here to have the illusion of separation. And that can create all kinds of dissonance and chaos. And especially in my heart, that was the big one. And I know that's a real challenge if you've been steeped in a certain fundamentalism, or you have parents or friends or all these people in your life who are expecting you to follow this certain path. It can be really hard just to say, that's not what's in my heart. That's not what's resonant with me. But all I could say is just stick with what you feel deeply is right. And I think that is often the best, way forward.
Thank you for sharing that. I wrote down something that you said. I think maybe I butchered it a little bit, but a loving God doesn't create a whole universe to shove half of it into an incinerator. I think I've never heard it phrased that way, but that is so beautiful. I mean, really, truly, it's such a great, like, digestible way of thinking about it. Why would that? How could that be? It couldn't be that way, right? I love that you're sharing the tools that you're finding that are helping. I think that, community is such a huge part of the religious experience. And I think that that's probably what it started out as, was it was just like a place to commune about something. And then somehow it got warped into something really different that was just kind of like just completely shattered in self-righteousness and like this only one track way of thinking. So just to advocate for IANDS, we have sharing groups online. So if anybody's out there looking for community, we meet multiple times during the week on Zoom, just to connect with each other, talk about consciousness, talk about our personal experiences, talk about other experiences that we've heard, and just have conversations around it, because a community is such a huge part, I think, of the human experience. So it's such a beautiful gift to be able to connect with others. And thank you for sharing about intuition. I read something or saw a video. I hate when people are like, I read something. Like, no, girl, you watched a video. Don't pretend like you read something. I saw this video and it was like, can you imagine if we argued with our other senses the way that we argue with our intuition? Could you imagine if I sat here looking at you and saying like, his background is white, and I'm arguing with my sight? Like, no, we can see that it's black. But so why do we do that with our intuition? You know, what has your journey been like, beginning to trust that inner voice? Do you feel like you have complete trust in it? Does it kind of waver day to day?
Yeah, it's still, again, there's still that feeling of being on the pendulum and swinging between where is it my ego and my self-preservation versus my spirit and that deep part of me that knows kind of the way forward. So, one of the best tools that I utilize is just meditation. I use the solfeggio frequencies, which are the frequencies that align with your chakras, and just spending time in each frequency and meditating on kind of the corresponding theme for that chakra. So if I'm in my root chakra, I'm thinking about being grounded to earth and the experience of being a human and being not having my 1 foot in, 1 foot out, which is kind of the way I was living for a long time. Was I'm not really living for this life. As a Christian, I was like, well, I'm going to heaven anyway, so I don't really need to take care of this body. I can trash it because it's temporary. And now it's weird because I have even more of a sense this body's temporary, but now I actually want to take care of it because I want to be available for the people in my life who need me, and I want to be able to share my experiences. So I've almost swung too far the other way, where I'm now terrified that I'm going to die too soon, whereas I used to just want to die as soon as possible. But meditation and just spending quiet time asking questions, asking the spirit, what am I here for? What is the point of this? What would you have me do? What different ways can I express love? And just taking time to listen for the response. And you may not hear anything. I haven't had a direct voice speak to me in my head, but I've just had this deep feeling kind of slowly instilled in me that I don't need to have all the answers laid out in front of me in this really satisfying, I mean, we live in a culture where everything's immediate gratification, and it's so hard to just take time to really let things sink in and settle. Something you actually said to me recently is spirit doesn't rush. And here I am trying to incorporate, 50,000 different techniques for how to be more spiritual. And I'm realizing, just take it easy, dude, one day at a time, and just put love into things you used to put fear and judgment and hatred into. It's really pretty simple. There's all these complex things we can make it about, but it's really about just reorganizing and reapproaching the way you used to look at life and the way you used to look at other people, especially when I see, politicians and leaders and people in the media who are really seemingly evil or destructive or whatever. If I can find a piece of myself in that and say, maybe I've done something similar in a past life, or maybe, in my heart, I would have done the same thing in this life if I was given the opportunity. I don't know. It really helps me to be able to identify with everybody and not see the other in people, and create out groups and all these things that we tend to do to make ourselves feel superior. So yeah, it's really just about, for me, meditation, taking time, being quiet, and just putting love into things I used to put fear into.
I really like that a lot. I love everything that you just said. Yeah, we've connected twice now, and each time I'm like always really excited. I feel very spiritually bonded to you. And I think that everything that you just shared about that is the beginning of the spiritual awakening process. Not just the beginning. I mean, the spiritual awakening process is over eternity. So every moment might feel like the beginning, but that rush, that urgency, like I have to try all the things and figure out which thing works. Well, maybe all the things work. That it was the same experience for me. I wanted to learn everything that I could, and I wanted to practice all these different things. And it was like, this is not actually a tangible, I cannot do 3 hours of meditation, ice cold baths, being raw vegan. I can't do all of it at once. Like maybe all the things work and maybe they're not all for me. It is good to learn about them though. And yeah, I love that, the idea that spirit is never running on a sense of urgency. Only for me anyway, only my ego is. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete about our time together.
I'm just so grateful, honestly, for this, just the awakening that is happening, that people are becoming interested in these ideas, that people could share a near-death experience without all this stigma attached to it. For a lot of people, they didn't share their story for years, sometimes decades, because of the stigma. And I feel like that's really starting to shift. Even just popular science is starting to kind of scratch its head a lot more and go, "Ooh, we don't know about all this quantum stuff and consciousness." And there's so much more to explore, I think, than just these really narrow views that we've all been trained to focus on. So I would just, tell anybody watching who's struggling through this, maybe on the early steps, just again, keep trusting that part of you that is pushing you forward towards love and reapproaching things in a way that you weren't used to before.
Thanks so much, David. So grateful for your willingness to come and serve our community today. And all of your links will be in the liner notes of this episode so people can connect with you and follow your podcast journey. And thank you again. We'll see you
Thank,
next time.
thank you, Betty. I appreciate it.